In the big meeting room of the Thompson mansion, Ricardo Montero laughed loudly and pointed at Carmen as she served coffee. "If you can translate what he said, I'll give my job to your mother," he joked. The Chinese businessman, Mr. Cheney, had been speaking in Mandarin for 5 minutes, using his hands in frustration because no one understood him. The beautiful room with a view of Beverly Hills Gardens saw another business meeting falling apart. William Thompson, the rich owner of a real estate company, was sweating nervously as he watched his biggest international deal slipping away. Their translator had canceled at the last minute, leaving everyone embarrassed in front of the Chinese billionaire. Carmen Silva, 48 years old, had been working as a maid in that mansion for 7 years. She kept her head down and quietly continued to serve coffee, as if invisible. Outside the room, her daughter Letitia, who was 22, leaned against the wall and listened to every word. She had come home early from college and once again saw her mother being used as a joke. Ricardo, the company's vice president, enjoyed moments like this. He loved making fun of people he thought were beneath him. "Go on, Carmen," he said with his usual cruel smile. "I bet you understood everything Mr. Cheney said. A hard-working woman like you must have learned Chinese while washing dishes, right?" Everyone laughed. Even William laughed a little, trying to ease the tension that was costing him millions. But Mr. Cheney didn't laugh at all. His dark eyes showed that he was losing patience with such unprofessional and disrespectful behavior. Carmen stayed calm as always. 30 years of working for wealthy families had taught her that showing anger only made things worse. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ricardo," she said softly. "I don't understand any of it." "Of course you don't," Ricardo shouted, still amused. Then he turned to William with a grin. "Let's make a bet. If your maid can translate what our Chinese friend said, I'll give her my job right now." The room burst into laughter. The idea was so ridiculous that even the security guards smiled. To them, the thought of a black woman without a college degree becoming vice president of a company run by Harvard graduates was just a joke. Outside the room, Letitia clenched her fists. But her face didn't just show anger. It showed calm strength. She took a deep breath, fixed her backpack, and walked toward the door. What Ricardo didn't know was that this young maid's daughter had spent the last 4 years studying international relations, focusing on the Asian market. And what none of them knew was that she had been speaking Mandarin for 7 years, ever, since she secretly promised herself she would one day change her mother's life. While everyone laughed at the idea of Carmen translating Chinese, Letitia smiled quietly. They had no idea what was coming next. Ricardo, still having fun, decided to push things further. "You know what, William?" he said, standing up. "If your maid can translate even one sentence of what our Chinese friend said, I'll not only give her my job, but also pay for her daughter's college education." The laughter grew louder. The idea of Carmen Silva, a poor black woman, getting such a high position sounded like pure comedy to them. Even Mr. Cheney, though he didn't understand the words, could feel the mocking tone and frowned. William, desperate to save the business deal, called Carmen forward. "Come here, Carmen. Let's finish this joke," he said in a patronizing tone. Carmen walked to the center of the room holding her empty tray, feeling the weight of all their eyes. 7 years of being invisible, and now she was being made a show for their amusement. "Mr. William, I really don't understand Chinese," she said quietly, trying to stay dignified. "Of course you don't." Ricardo clapped his hands, pretending to enjoy a comedy act. "But try anyway. Say something in Chinese. I'm sure Mr. Cheney will love your version." From the hallway, Letitia watched everything. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from controlled anger that had been building for years. She remembered the day she decided to learn Mandarin, 3 years ago, after hearing Ricardo say that people like them never try to improve. At that time, Letitia had just won a partial scholarship to study international relations. She worked overnight shifts at a bakery to pay the rest of her tuition. When she learned that Thompson's company was expanding into Asia, she made a promise that changed her life. She would become fluent in Mandarin and one day prove that real talent has no color or surname. It took her 3 years of waking up at 4 a.m. to study before work, 3 years of watching free videos online, using learning apps, and practicing pronunciation alone in the mirror. 3 years of dreaming about giving her mother a better life, far away from that mansion where she was treated like furniture. "What are you waiting for, Carmen?" Ricardo asked, now sounding annoyed. Or are you going to admit you're just another uneducated maid who'll never rise above her place? Ricardo's last words cut through the air like a knife. Mr. Cheney, who actually understood more Portuguese than he had shown, felt his anger rise. In Chinese culture, publicly disrespecting someone, especially an older person, is one of the worst insults. Carmen looked down, not because she was ashamed, but because she had learned long ago that staying quiet and small was the best way to survive around cruel people. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ricardo, you're right," she said softly. "Of course I'm right," Ricardo said proudly, enjoying everyone's attention. "That's the difference between us and you. We prepare ourselves. We study. We get educated. You just wait for luck to fall from the sky." Letitia's fist tightened. Every word he spoke was an insult, not only to her mother, but to all people who worked hard to change their lives. Ricardo had no idea that the kind of person he mocked was standing just outside that door. William Thompson, realizing things were getting uncomfortable, tried to calm the situation. "Ricardo, I think that's enough. Let's get back to business," he said. "Business?" Ricardo laughed loudly. "What business, William? Our interpreter ran away, our client is angry, and you still want to talk about business? The only person here who even tried to communicate with him was your maid. And look how that turned out." That was the final straw for Mr. Cheney. He suddenly stood up and spoke in Mandarin for nearly 2 minutes, his voice full of anger and disappointment. He pointed at Ricardo, then at Carmen, clearly expressing his disgust at what was happening. "There you go," Ricardo said loudly, thinking he had proven his point. He's furious. "Congratulations, William. You just lost the biggest deal of your life because you hired amateurs." But from the hallway, Letitia understood every single word Mr. Cheney said. He wasn't only upset about the missing translator, he was deeply offended by Ricardo's behavior. He compared Ricardo to small, weak men who build their pride by humiliating others. He said he would never do business with people who treated employees like jokes. He also said something that touched Letitia deeply. He grew up poor in Shanghai, and his own mother had worked as a maid to pay for his education. He said he could see the same quiet strength in Carmen that his mother once had. Finally, he warned that he would cancel all business with the company unless someone in the next 5 minutes showed real respect and professionalism. 5 minutes. That was all Letitia had. She took a deep breath, adjusted her backpack, and stepped forward with determination. 7 years of her mother's humiliation, 3 years of secret preparation, and now, just 5 minutes to change everything. Ricardo Montero had no idea that he had underestimated not only Carmen, but an entire family that turned every insult into motivation and every obstacle into a step upward. Every cruel laugh had become fuel, and now it was time for Letitia to use it. She took another deep breath. 5 minutes. That was all the time Mr. Cheney had given before canceling the multi-million-dollar deal. Those 5 minutes would decide not just the future of Thompson Enterprises, but whether years of Letitia's hard work and hidden study would finally pay off. For 3 years, she hadn't only learned Mandarin. She had also studied Chinese business culture, how to negotiate respectfully, and the small cultural details that decide success or failure. Every morning, she woke at 4 a.m. to study before her bakery shift. Every weekend, she spent long hours in the university library reading about the Asian market. She saved every bit of money to buy books on international business. What kept her going wasn't just the dream of a better life. It was the painful memory of every insult, every laugh, and every time her mother was treated as less than human. Letitia could still remember every humiliation her mother had suffered in that house, like the day Isabella, William's teenage daughter, had thrown orange juice on the clean floor and said, "Oops, your mother will have to clean it again." Or when Ricardo had said in front of Carmen, "At least she knows her place. She doesn't dream of impossible things." Each cruel word had added fuel to Letitia's secret plan. She knew that someday she would prove that real ability and intelligence had no color, no social class, and no family name. And that day had come sooner than she ever expected. From the hallway, she heard Ricardo mocking again. "You know, William," he said loudly, "we should hire more maids like Carmen. At least they know their limits. They don't dream of doing things they weren't born to do." Mr. Cheney spoke again in Mandarin, his voice heavy with anger. "This man is a shame to any serious company," he said. How can I trust my investments to people who treat their employees as jokes? Letitia knew she had to act fast, but she also knew she needed to look professional. She couldn't just rush in like an emotional student. She had to appear confident and prepared. That's when she noticed something that changed everything. On a small table near the door lay Mr. Cheney's open document folder showing contracts written in Mandarin. Quietly, Letitia moved closer and took quick photos of 2 pages with her phone. Within seconds, a plan formed in her mind. She took a deep breath, then gently knocked on the conference room door. "Excuse me," she said as she walked in, standing tall and calm. "I'm Letitia Silva from UCLA's International Relations Consulting Program. I'm here to solve the communication problem you're facing." Everyone turned to look at her. Ricardo frowned, confused. William blinked several times, trying to understand what was happening. Carmen froze in shock, recognizing her daughter but not knowing what she was doing there. "Excuse me, but who called you?" Ricardo asked with clear disgust. "And who said we need consulting from?" "A young black woman." Letitia gave a calm smile. "Interesting, Mr. Ricardo, that this is your first question," she said politely. "But let me explain why I'm here." Then she turned directly to Mr. Cheney and spoke in perfect Mandarin. "Mr. Cheney, I apologize for the disrespect you have faced here. I'm here to offer my professional translation services so we can handle this situation properly." Mr. Cheney immediately stood up, his face lighting up with relief and surprise. "Finally, someone who speaks my language correctly," he said in Mandarin. "Where are you from?" "Your pronunciation is excellent." "I'm from Los Angeles, Mr. Cheney," Letitia replied fluently in Mandarin. "But I have studied the language for several years, focusing on Chinese-American business negotiations." Ricardo was speechless. William stared at her, unable to believe that this young black woman, his maid's daughter, was speaking fluent Mandarin. Carmen looked at her daughter with pride mixed with fear, worried that she might lose everything by standing up like this. "Wait a second," Ricardo shouted, pointing at her. "Aren't you the maid's daughter?" "What's going on here?" Mr. Cheney, who understood English, looked from Letitia to Carmen, then back again. "Is this your mother?" he asked in Mandarin. "Yes, Mr. Cheney," Letitia replied. "And that's exactly why I'm here. I heard your words earlier about respect, dignity, and professionalism. I came to build the bridge of communication that this company clearly lacks." For the first time that morning, Mr. Cheney smiled. "Interesting." "Very interesting," he said. "Tell me, young lady, did you hear everything I said earlier?" "Every word, Mr. Cheney," Letitia answered. "And I promise you'll be satisfied with the solution I'm going to propose." That was when Ricardo exploded. "This is insane." "You can't just walk in and interrupt our meeting. You're a maid's daughter, not some international consultant." Letitia turned to him calmly, her eyes steady with quiet confidence. "Mr. Ricardo, you made a bet a few minutes ago," she said. "You promised to give up your job to whoever could translate what Mr. Cheney said. I'm here to accept that bet. But you're not the maid. The bet was with your mother," Ricardo argued. "The exact words," Letitia replied, taking out her phone and pressing play on a recording, were these: "If anyone can translate what our Chinese friend said, I'll give up my job." Those were your words, Mr. Ricardo, and I have witnesses. Mr. Cheney watched the scene with great interest. He saw not only that this young woman spoke his language perfectly, but also that she had sharp intelligence and courage. William, realizing he had lost control of the situation, tried to calm things down. "Letitia, right? Maybe we can talk about this privately." "There's nothing to discuss in private, Mr. Thompson," Letitia replied firmly. The bet was public. Mr. Cheney was publicly disrespected, and my mother was publicly humiliated. So the solution will also be public. Ricardo's face turned red with anger. "This is absurd. You're just a student. You can't just—" "I can't what, Mr. Ricardo?" Letitia interrupted, her voice steady. "I can't be competent? I can't speak languages?" Letitia looked straight at Ricardo. "So, I can't have dreams just because of my color or where I come from?" she said calmly. The room went silent. Mr. Chun watched her carefully, impressed by her confidence and respect. Then something surprising happened. Letitia picked up a paper she had seen earlier in Mr. Chun's folder and handed it to him. "Mr. Chun," she said, "I think there's a mistake in the numbers on page 23 of your contract. The amounts in yuan don't match the dollar conversion." Mr. Chun quickly checked the paper and looked shocked. "You're right." "How did you notice that?" Because I studied not only your language, Mr. Chun, but also your market, Letitia answered. For Chinese business, even small details matter a lot. Everyone in the room realized she wasn't just a student who got lucky. She was someone who had prepared for this moment for years, turning every insult into strength. Ricardo felt like the floor had vanished under him. William looked lost, realizing he had no control now. And Carmen, after 7 long years in that house, finally felt proud of her daughter. But no one knew Letitia still had one last surprise. What she was about to show would not only save the deal, but also change everything about how they saw her. Every early morning of study, every quiet insult, every challenge had led her to this exact moment where being underestimated became her greatest power. Letitia took a deep breath and faced Mr. Chun. "Mr. Chun," she said, 15 minutes ago, you said something important." Then, in perfect Mandarin, she began to translate every word he had said earlier. "You said you were disappointed by the lack of professionalism here, that you expected real partners but found a place where workers are treated badly for fun." Ricardo's face turned pale. Mr. Chun nodded. Confirming her translation, Letitia continued, "You also said you grew up poor in Shanghai, and your mother worked as a maid so you could study. You said you would never do business with people who treat workers as toys." William's face was white as chalk. Each word destroyed his dream of expanding the company abroad. "And finally," Letitia said, "you said you would cancel all business unless someone showed true skill in 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes ended 2 minutes ago." The room froze. Ricardo tried to protest. "That's impossible." "She can't just—" Mr. Chun stood up and spoke in clear English. She translated everything perfectly, every word. "How do you explain that, Mr. Ricardo?" Letitia calmly took out her phone. "Mr. Chun," she said, "I'd like to show you something." She turned the screen toward him. It was an app she had created herself, a live translation app she built for her university project, made for Chinese-American business meetings. Mr. Chun's eyes opened wide in amazement. Mr. Chun looked at Letitia in surprise. "You created this?" "Yes, sir," she said proudly. "It was my final project for my degree in international relations. The app doesn't just translate words. It also understands culture and business rules between Chinese and American companies." Ricardo looked completely defeated. "William, you can't seriously be thinking—" "Thinking what, Ricardo?" William interrupted, his voice cold and angry. "Thinking that a 22-year-old woman just saved a deal you almost destroyed? That she showed more skill in 10 minutes than you have in 8 years? Mr. Chun took Letitia's phone and studied the app. "How many people can use this?" "For now, only me, Mr. Chun," Letitia said. "But I can license it to companies that truly respect communication between cultures." "And how much for an exclusive license?" he asked. Letitia smiled calmly. "That depends on the package. Mr. Chun, an exclusive license for your business group, $500,000. Personal consulting for expansion into the American market, $300,000 a year. And full cultural management for all your American investments, $1 million yearly." The whole room went silent. Then Mr. Chun smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "It's a deal," he said. Ricardo sank into his chair, pale and speechless. "$1 million? She's asking for $1 million. And I'm paying," Mr. Chun replied sharply. "Because real skill is worth every cent." He turned to William. "Mr. Thompson, I have one condition. Keep our contract, but this young woman will be my official representative in all future business with your company." William looked at Letitia, then at Ricardo, who was sweating heavily. "And what about the position we promised?" he asked. Letitia opened the folder she brought. "I have a full recording of Mr. Ricardo's bet," she said. She played the audio, and Ricardo's voice filled the room. "If anyone can translate what our Chinese friend said, I'll give up my position." "I bet she understands everything Mr. Chun said." "Those were your exact words, Mr. Ricardo," Letitia said calmly. "And everyone here heard them," Ricardo exploded. "This is crazy." "You can't just record a private talk." "Private?" Letitia raised an eyebrow. "It was a business meeting in front of witnesses." "Maybe you should review what private really means." Mr. Chun watched her with deep respect. She not only spoke his language perfectly, but also showed clear intelligence and courage. "William," Mr. Chun said firmly, "I only work with honest people. This man," he pointed at Ricardo, lied about having an interpreter, insulted employees, and now tries to deny his own promise. How can I trust a company that accepts such behavior? William Thompson now stood at a difficult crossroads. Losing Mr. Chun meant losing everything. Losing Mr. Chun meant losing $200 million in future deals. Keeping Ricardo meant losing the company's honor. Ricardo, William said slowly, you're fired. The room went completely silent. Ricardo stepped back in shock. William, you can't. We've worked together for 8 years. I built half of this company's deals. You almost destroyed the biggest one, William said coldly. And you did it by humiliating an employee in front of an international client. Carmen, who had stayed quiet all this time, finally spoke. Mr. William, I can't take Mr. Ricardo's position. I'm not qualified. Letitia turned to her mother with a proud smile. Mom, who said the position was for you? She looked at William. The bet was that whoever translated would get the position. I'm the one who translated. The position is mine. Mr. Chun clapped slowly. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Ricardo turned red with anger. You can't do that. I have rights. I have a contract. Had, William corrected. And if you're unsure about your rights, talk to your lawyer. He'll explain how a public promise can still be binding. Letitia calmly walked to Ricardo and held out her hand. Your office keys, please. And your access card. Ricardo stared at her hand like it was a snake. The humiliation was complete. The maid's daughter had destroyed his career, his pride, and his arrogance all in one moment. This isn't over, he said, his voice shaking as he handed over the keys. For you it is, Letitia replied softly. For me, it's just beginning. Mr. Chun came closer. One question, how did you know I'd be here today? I didn't, Letitia said, smiling. But I've been preparing for 3 years for any chance like this. I studied Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, and Arabic, because opportunities come to people who are ready. And the app? He asked. I finished it just last week. I haven't even shown it to my university yet. Mr. Chun laughed with respect. You turned years of humiliation into the power of excellence. That is real intelligence. Ricardo left the room like a ghost, his career in ruins. Outside, he could still hear the meeting continue. Mr. Chun signing million-dollar deals with the company he once controlled, now represented by the young woman he had insulted. In the hallway, Ricardo finally understood the painful lesson that cost him everything. Never underestimate someone who works harder than you believe they can. 6 months later, Letitia sat in her new office on the 20th floor as Vice President of International Relations at Thompson Enterprises. Her first decision as an executive was to hire her mother, Carmen, as quality supervisor, with a salary 3 times higher than before. Mr. Chun became both her business partner and her mentor. Letitia's translation app had already been licensed to 15 multinational companies, earning over $3 million a year. She used part of the money to open a free language school for poor communities. Skill has no color, age, or last name, she often said in her business talks. It only has results. Meanwhile, Ricardo struggled to find work. Fired with no recommendation, his arrogance became a warning story across Los Angeles. People told his story as an example of how prejudice can destroy even the most successful careers. One afternoon, Ricardo appeared in the lobby of Thompson Enterprises, waiting nervously. Letitia came down to see him. I came to ask for a chance, he said quietly. Anything. I've learned my lesson. Letitia looked at him for a moment. Ricardo, second chances are not asked for, they're earned. When you truly change, the world will give you another chance. But that's not for me to decide. Ricardo left with his head low, finally understanding that those who humiliate others end up humiliating themselves. Carmen, now respected and confident, smiled as she watched her daughter change not only their lives, but also inspire many young people at her language school. Mom, Letitia said one quiet evening, thank you for teaching me that dignity is not for sale no matter what the world says. The best revenge wasn't destroying Ricardo. It was building something greater than he ever could. Letitia proved that when skill meets opportunity, no prejudice or arrogance can stop success. In the end, Ricardo tried to humiliate a family, but only humiliated himself. Letitia and Carmen showed that real victory isn't about revenge. It's about rising so high that those who hurt you no longer matter.